Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Stacey Goddard, and I'm the Paula Phillips Bernstein Class of 58 Faculty Director of the Madeline K. Albright Institute of Global Affairs. And I am delighted to have you here for our talk today, which is co-sponsored with the Suzy Newhouse Center, as well as presented as a part of the Wellesley College Middle Eastern Studies J.R. Soche Cultural Events Series. So today's talk is For Sama, a conversation with filmmaker Waad al-Kateab. Our facilitator of this conversation is Professor Rachid Aadnani. Professor Rachid Aadnani works in the Middle Eastern Studies program at Wellesley College, and his research interests focus on the intersection of language and power in politics, with a focus specifically on contemporary cultural and linguistic practices in North Africa and the Middle East. He's particularly interested in the language of resistance, that is to say, how language serves as a medium for dissidence in the Middle East. And he has published several articles on this topic on how language, including that found in poetry and music, can be an instrument of resistance. He is also an avid and accomplished photographer, and we cannot be more happier to have him leading our discussion today. I want to turn to our guest. I am beyond honored to introduce journalist and filmmaker Waad al-Kateab. Ms. al-Kateab resides in London with her family, her husband and her 2 daughters, but as she will tell you, her home is Aleppo, Syria. In 2011, she was in Aleppo studying economics at the university when Syrians began their protests against Bashar al-Assad's authoritarian government. She began reporting on the protests for Channel 4 News, and as the conflict escalated and Assad's actions against the protesters and the Syrian people grew more violent, she decided not only to stay in Aleppo, but to document her 5 years during the uprising in Syria. It's a conflict that has left over 400,000 dead, 500 million that are forced to leave their home of Syria, and 6 million others displaced within the country. Ms. al-Kateab was among those that left her home. She lives today in London. After coming to London, she worked with another filmmaker, Edward Watts, to produce the brilliant documentary For Sama that we will discuss today. This film gives us not only the story of an uprising and the people of Syria, but also the female experience of war. We watch her, she falls in love, we watch her, she gets married and gives birth to her daughter, Sama, all while this cataclysmic conflict goes on around her. I want to say as a personal note, I watched this film for the first time last year at the start of the pandemic. I was prepared for a challenging film. What I was not prepared for was the humanity that Ms. al-Kateab captures throughout. I will never erase the scenes of her wedding, the scenes that capture the love of her daughter, all amidst this conflict. Thank you for that. It's not at all surprising then that this film has garnered accolades. It has won over 50 awards, capturing the Prix d'Or for Best Documentary at the Cannes Film Festival, the Grand Jury Award for Best Documentary at the 2019 South by Southwest Film Festival, as well as an Academy Award nomination for Best Feature Documentary last year. Before turning our conversation over, I do want to express a few more thank yous. We at the Albright Institute are grateful for the partnership with the Suzy Newhouse Center, the Middle East Studies program, as well as for Frontline PBS to help us bringing this conversation to campus. And for that, I want to give a special thank you to Erica Howard, who worked with us to bring this event to you today. I want to say that we're particularly grateful to Lisa Hazelgrove and Rachel Chadwick, who work at Action for Sama. Now, Action for Sama is an organization that works to attempt to prevent the bombing of hospitals in Syria. And I would urge you to go and visit their website after our talk today. Ms. al-Kateab, welcome to Wellesley. Thank you for sharing your time and thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stacey. Your words and your feeling really reach me, and it's really I'm so grateful to be with you today and to everyone who's watching. It's been a very, very long 2 years since the film was out, and until today, I still feel like every time I'm talking about it or meeting people who have seen the film, even ages ago, I still feel this connection. So thank you so much for giving me that feeling. This year and a month ago, we celebrated 10 years of the Syrian revolution. Celebrated is a very tough word to mark this 10 years, but at the same time, like to find hope after 10 years of death and suffering and pain. It was something really deserved to be celebrated, to have that, like the same, that the Syrian people still thinking that Assad is not the right person to rule Syria, and within all the this, like destroying the whole country with all the crimes that happened, he's still in his palace in Syria today, and we are now in the exile. Although all of this, and although we can see that this situation right now on the ground, it's not going any better, but we still feel that it's worth it to keep the fight going. It's worth it for all the people who were killed, and they sacrificed their life for our freedom, for our better future. And that's why maybe celebrating is like the right word to say this. The film was something I've never intended to do. Everything was coming into my mind through the 5 years of living there was, I will be killed. I will never expected, like I will be like alive. I will be today in London safe. And for that reason, I kept filming. And I always like look at that in the way, like if I knew one day I will be out, I will never film what I filmed. I will never keep my camera direct to these people, like pain, to our suffering, to our fears, to everything we went through in that situation. And I think in this way, I'm very grateful for everyone who was there, everyone who stood with us, like inside Syria, in Aleppo, every doctor, every nurse, everyone from the civil defense, every people in this field community and the civil society who were trying to create hope and keep our life going and function it, even in the very, very basic services. I'm also very grateful for every journalist who came into Syria, who tried to report from on the ground or outside. Every also people who stood with Syria. And I know that we are not in any good position today, but I understand that at the end we are just individuals, public people who standing against a very strong, powerful, and like criminal at the same time, like regime supported by Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah militia. So wherever we are today, I still think that because we still existed, because we still have the story, because we still own our narrative, we still winning. Although I'm aware exactly to the amount and the huge amount of pain and suffering and sacrifice the Syrian people have done through the last 10 years. I won't like speak anymore. I would love more maybe to hear from you, to hear your question and to have more the conversation. So please, Dr. Rachid, I'm very also honored to be talking with you. So thank you for your time for this.
Thank you so much, Ms. Waad al-Kateab. Really, really wonderful to have you with us today. And thank you so much for that initial presentation. Something that actually stuck with me from what you just said is the idea of owning one's narrative, which comes through loud and clear through your wonderful, but also devastatingly powerful film. My question is basically because you structured your film as a love letter on many levels to Sama, your daughter, and also to Aleppo itself, and by that token also to Syria at large. And the stories of Sama are coming to life in a way that is very parallel to the story of the Syrian uprising, specifically the Aleppo situation. For Sama, unflinchingly throws the viewer directly into the grim heart of the Battle of Aleppo, Ma'arakat Halab. For Sama, dives deep into the bombed out buildings to the heart of the tragedy that is the Syrian conflict. A volunteer-staffed hospital struggling to fix and mend the bodies and lives shattered by the regime's bombs. Nestled deep inside a residential neighborhood, seemingly away from the front lines, but at the same time at the very heart of the front lines of this conflict, where hospitals have become prime target. My first question is actually, if I wanted to talk a little bit, to tell us a little bit more about this, the owning one's narrative, and if there is a moment where you decided, I have to put this together, I have to film this. Was there a moment like that? I'm curious a little bit about the start of the idea of making the film.
Yeah, I mean, the main time when I thought I'm going to do a film was after the displacement happened. Before this, all these 5 years, I was just filming and literally kept filming without even understanding how valuable is this material. I know that, it's worth my life, but now I'm fully understand what does that really mean. Because for me, even to the moment I would say when the film was released, this footage and this thing was something I'm thinking, it's more like mine. It's valuable because it's just for me, but not for other people. I didn't even expected that people will see the film and be connected in this way. And through this 5 years, we were just trying to when we were there, I've never thought really about it. I was inside this day by day, minute by minute. And I would say the moment when I found out how important is it, this footage, was literally exactly this day, which is the 3rd of Ramadan. That was a totally different month in 2013. But at that time, that's when we lost Ghais and Mahmoud. And I just woke up today, remembering them. And I wrote something on Facebook about how different is it the morning after you lose someone. And it was exactly this moment. And it was because, I was filming everything. I was trying just to capture as much as I can, but not everything in the right meaning, like what I've done later. I was just trying, to film maskers, patients, people who are injured or have an issues or something. But in some moments, I felt some of this life. And I was following Ghais, Mahmoud, Hamza, other guys in the hospital, filming them while they're going to play football or playing cards or just sitting, having a normal dinner. And they were always questioning me. And I was questioning myself at the same time. Why we are filming this life moments? For us, the death, it's very understandable why we're doing this. It's crimes, it's documenting important thing, it's people who are dying. But then the moment when Ghais and Omar and Mahmoud were killed and Omar was injured that day, I just watched some of this material where there's nothing important really happening. But for a moment, I remember how we all had that room, I just played a normal clip of Ghais, and that was 2 days before. And for a second, we forget that he's dead. And that's when I felt that this life around me, everything around might be vanish at any second. Everything could be destroyed, even me, even all these memories that we are creating now might not be even a memory if I didn't record them. And for that reason, I just kept filming, and everyone around even understand how important it is to keep this life being saved in this way. But the decision of making the film was totally right after I left Aleppo. And that's when I went to Turkey. From Turkey, I came to London for the first time. And then we had this discussion about making a longer piece, because I worked before with the news. We did 24 reports where they were around 4 or 5 minutes. But then when I came here the first time and I start show people around me this material, that's when we felt we can do something really, really big. And something really important to mention, that all this footage, or most of the footage you can see in Forsama, especially the personal ones, it wasn't something I wanted to share or to make it to a film or to a movie. And I've never expected that even this footage might work, for a movie or a film or something. I recorded part of my life as a personal things for me, for my daughter, for my family if I was killed, for anyone who could see this. But I was more about I'm gonna do a story about Aleppo, about the life there, about other people there. And like the moment when I was here, when I realized that no, it might be like both together, and it might be more like affected and connected, make this connection to the people through this story.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful and thankful that you kept filming. Um, the um, the other question that I actually had in mind that, and I actually, this became an obsession because I kept thinking about your name, Waad,
Yeah.
and Sema. So I also kept thinking about Waad Lesema, and a lot of, and I was not disappointed because there's a lot of moments in actually the film where it did feel like you were making a promise to Sema. That there was so in your conversation with her. And I talked with my colleagues earlier that when I first saw that your documentary was coming under the banner of Frontline, I was actually expecting it when I started watching the film last year. I was expecting actually to hear the same narrative style that is in Frontline usually. And then what I got was your voice and your very, very soft spoken narration of the film. So I'm curious a little bit. My next question is actually about sort of classification, so to speak, of documentary films. And I have to say that your film was actually really, really hard to classify in terms of documentaries because it borrows and it uses techniques from a lot of different styles of documentary filmmaking. And I'm curious, there is the poetic, there is the performative, there's definitely the participatory, there's the expository in it. And I think all together create a really, really powerful entity. And I'm wondering actually if you had an idea where while you were working on where your documentary would fit in terms of documentary genres. Not that
I
it
mean,
needs to be.
I really don't know. Like, I mean, no, thank you for this question. It's really like making me think more and more about it. But the main thing, because I wasn't like a documentarian before, I've never like touched a camera before. I don't know even like how this word like works, and I really was learning the process behind any documentary as I was editing. So like this 5 years of filming was just like a raw material. I was trying to document it day by day. I learned a lot through this 5 years. I made like so much mistakes, and I learned from people who are professional, other people who like similar situation to mine, and we were kind of sharing this experience together. So the way how, and then when I met with Edward, I was just trying, to be as flexible as I can to understand all this like new word, and also as like I would say like tough and hard as I can to keep the story, and make it like my own narrative, like not just what some like journalist or director who never like been to Syria, like how they were trying to do. And Edward was like amazing in that understanding because he was trying to help me more, like, to tell my own story instead of taking this material and make his own story with this film. And that was really like a great 2 years of working together and being able, to find this line between my life, who I filmed and I captured, and also the great experience that Edward has in making films, and how we can, like find the way of telling the story in a cinematic way, in a way that it could be accessible and acceptable for people to understand, but also in the same like spirit that I went through while I was there in Aleppo.
It, it was perfectly done. I can't believe how beautiful the film holds together as a unit. And I just
How hard was it to make it? Like it was literally 2 years of I don't know the right word, but it was joy, and it was a lot of like fights, a lot of like just like to find this like line and stick to this line. And also because I have over like 500 hours of footage, so there was no clear way how to tell the story or how to make it. And that was like a very, very tough like decisions at every point. And also to relive everything again and again and again, trying to explain to other people what does that mean, and trying for me to understand like what I really want to say over this or about this or about that. It was like just like I would say two very, very tough years.
Thank you. I want to go a little bit into like a specific moment in the film and ask you a couple of questions, actually, if you don't mind about that. And I'll read a little bit of some of the narrative text that came through the film. This is July 2016, a really, really dark time. And your narrative voice over the says, I quote, "The Syrian regime and its allies have put us under siege in Aleppo, my city. We never thought the world would let this happen. I keep filming. It gives me a reason to be here. It makes the nightmares feel worthwhile. When I hear the Russian planes in the sky, it cuts through me. I think your Arabic actually felt actually better there because I would translate it as I feel it as if it were burrowing or drilling through my head. Yes, I am scared of dying, but what scares me the most is losing you, Sama. I've made this film for you. I need you to understand why your father and I made the choices we did, what we were fighting for. So this is so powerful, and I'm sorry if I'm bringing up, any memories of that. I will totally admit that I watched your film a couple of times. I think the second time I was better prepared because I put a box of Kleenex next to me, and that helped me, get through some of the emotions in the film. Uh, One thing that I found absolutely beautiful about your film and so eloquent is that you, in the midst of everything that is going on, you find really beautiful and subtle ways of featuring the day-to-day resistance that people are doing. It's in a way that is, usually in conflicts, what we hear about is the big things, the bombs, the armies, the artillery, etc., and also the people are resisting. But what we tend to kind of forget are the mothers and people who are just holding the fabric of society together. So I'm curious, especially here, I'm thinking of your wonderful friend, Hafra, and her today interaction. And I thought that including that in the documentary was absolutely fantastic because it gives us this very, very intimate look at what is going on. So my question is really about those day-to-day acts of resistance and how important they are.
Yeah, I mean, it was important for me to live and for everyone who is living there because like in the middle of the darkness like moments, you find this moments like in front of you. It's not something I create, or I invent like and made it in the film to make people understand. It was something really through the experience. And like in the moments when we were in the basement, like, and we don't know if the airplane will like attack us where we were or not, you find out how people just like laugh and crack jokes and try to find anything, to stick to this like hope. So I mean, this is something I was just trying to reflect from what I've been through and what you can see in the community. And sometimes really like you don't need to find any like way of exploring this. If you just watch any like 5 minutes like of any situation, you can see how we or people were just trying to like break this fear with some jokes sometimes, with some hope in other times. And like I would say that's the only thing why we survived.
Thank you. I think another moment that I want to ask about is this is 1 year earlier, to the 18th of March 2015. There's the celebrations of Aleppo's liberation. And your voice in the narration says, and I quote, "The happiness you brought us was laced with fear. Our new life felt so fragile as the freedom we felt in Aleppo. Islamic extremists were trying to take over the rebellion, but what they did was nothing compared to the brutality of the regime." I felt like this was a moment where there was a very dark shift in the mood in the city, that something else is happening. And I really appreciated the subtlety that you showed in terms of at the same time talking about this issue of new restrictions coming from the Islamists. And I think at that scene, you're dressing up to go outside. So it was done in a really subtle way that shows that there is a new element that's added in, but also that you want to keep the eyes on the real, where the horrors are coming from, is from the regime. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about this period, and in terms of has it restricted your ability to move around and film more than before that point?
Yeah, I mean, like we were lucky enough in Aleppo that ISIS and like the very, very extremist group weren't like for very, very long time. We had them for like 6 months, I would say, and 3 of them were very clear, why the first 3 months were very like hidden even from us. And at that time, there was so many activists who started to be like disappeared and kidnapped. And one of them was one of my cousins who was detained by the Syrian regime for twice and then kidnapped by ISIS. And so far, we know nothing about him. So it wasn't something like, might be personal or something. It was like a very clear message, and for us as Syrian, it's very also like clear connection, but with Assad regime, because most of these people who are the leaders of ISIS or al-Nusra or other groups or militias were in Assad prisons before, and he released them. And he very aware that what could happen if he released them, while he kept arrested like thousands of people who were demanding freedom and democracy and like a better life for the Syrian people. So for us, like, this is part of the result of the Syrian regime, and why I was very clear to make this. Yeah, so I was really trying to point this very, very clearly, because I mean, the extremists and the ISIS was very clear, serious risk for all of us, but they were part of what the regime was trying to do, and how to make us silent, and to put pressure on the Syrian revolution and to everyone who like stood against them. So it was just like, part of the reality of that situation, and I wanted to make it clear for so many people, because people so far think that the main problem in Syria is having like extremists or ISIS, while ISIS was a very like small part of what happened in Syria, and it's all because and like by the Syrian regime at the end.
Absolutely. One more question actually about that, about the film in general. One thing that I really appreciated also is that you've used some footage that is not yours in the film, but it's very limited. And a lot of times documentaries can sometimes really rely a lot more heavily on footage, about battles and about bombardments, etc. And I appreciated that you used it in a way to highlight the tragedy and what's going on, but without taking away from that, owning the narrative and keeping the focus on the narrative that you want to share. So I'm curious whether that was a deliberate decision on your part, or whether it was because of limited footage, or what the situation was.
Yeah, so I had like so many footage, and I was at one point really not like, I don't need to rely on anything else, but in some parts I felt that there is like ironic or a very important like places where I needed to use other people footage, and not just like to make it, like in that context, but also like to make it more about, it's not just me, like, yeah, it's my story at this point, but there's so many other people who were filming, and this filming was like a very, very important like element in the whole Syrian revolution. And like, for example, like one of the scenes when I was in the university square early on, and the big protest was happening. The clip when someone was inside the UN car trying to film the people who are being beaten to death on the street outside. This is like someone I got from a friend who was at that time there. And I feel that this is, you know, like bringing another eye and an important also element to this reality. So it was really important, I mean, to share some of this footage, but at the end, like limited as much as we can, because we already have like lots of stories and places where we can put something.
I was talking to a really dear friend and also a wonderful artist from was also Syrian who resides in the UAE these days, and we were talking about your documentary, and one of the words that he used to describe actually your character, he said used the word "jaria," and it's a word that comes up in your description of yourself actually early on in the film. Um, and you used when you're talking about yourself as a student in at college, you used the same word, "jaria," daring. Um, and when I heard that word actually, and for some reason, I thought back to the Oscar ceremonies for last year, um, and a famous dress bearing this line in exquisitely, exquisite. Oh, well, I guess we have technical issue, so hold on a second while we resolve it. Seems like the link to director Waad al-Khateab was lost. And actually, while we're waiting, I also want to extend a big thank you to my dear colleague, friend, and mentor, Professor Ledvine Kapteins. We're teaching a class together on film and narratives of social change in the modern Middle East and North Africa. And our class meets at this time. So I'm really glad that we could pull this into our class and give our students a really meaningful, wonderful film to talk about. But maybe while we wait, we can show you the question that I was going to ask Waad al-Khateab about next. It's a visual, and it's a picture worth 1,000 words. So this, so for the Oscars ceremony for 2020, for which the film was nominated, Waad al-Khateab made her appearance with her husband Hamza and Sama, and the dress that Waad al-Khateab is wearing by a local designer. I pulled out the text that's on the dress and I put it up top on the picture. It says in Arabic, تجرأنا على الحلم لن نندم على الكرامة. We dare to dream and we will not regret dignity. And actually, that line on the dress became pretty much a slogan for the campaign for Sama afterwards, and for a whole humanitarian campaign. For one, to pressure the Syrian government against targeting hospitals and civilians, and also just to build more support for the victims of the Syrian conflict. So I wanted her to tell us a little bit more story about that dress, how it came about, and what's the outlook and what's going on in terms of the campaign.
We're going to give it a few more minutes here. We're assessing whether or not Wad will be able to rejoin us. If you're one of those people that feels the need to scroll through things while you are waiting to see what's happening, I can suggest a few websites. First of all, we have one in the chat. You can go ahead and visit the Action for Sama website. And there you'll find a campaign that Waad has been very committed to, which is working to protect hospitals in Syria from being bombed. If you haven't seen the film, you'll understand, you might not know that the bombing of hospitals in Syria was no accident. This was deliberate action that was taken in order to attempt to kind of put down the conflict and the Syrian people. So this was not a kind of incidental damage during wartime. This was targeted. And there's been very little the international community can do. So if you'd like to go ahead and read about that campaign, you should. And in general, you know, without singling out any particular institutions, because there are so very many that have been working to try to deal with and solve the Syrian conflict, but also to aid the refugees that have had to leave Syria because of that conflict. Like I said, at the beginning of the talk, there have been over 5.5 million refugees that have had to flee Syria. Many of them are actually in areas around Syria. Some of them, as many of you know, have gone to Europe. And the fact is, everybody, all of them need help and support. So actually this January, we at the Albright Institute actually talked to David Miliband, CEO of the International Rescue Committee. And that's just one among many different organizations that you might think to look to if you are interested in aiding those that were most harmed by the Syrian conflict.
And there was a moment actually in the film where after the hospital that Waad al-Kateab's husband runs is bombed in a way that damaged it beyond repair, basically, as many of the people in the documentary say. They were in the process of looking for another location to build, to basically establish another one. And one of some of the requirements that they were looking for in terms of a building that would host such a hospital, the requirements are just so indicative of just what an awful situation these people are finding themselves in terms of the onslaught by the regime, supported by the Russian airplanes, because they were looking for a building that would basically resist bombings and that would defy GPS systems. So they were looking for a building that's basically nondescript, that's not located on any maps, which is usually when you're thinking of hospitals, you want the hospitals to be known where they are so that people can get to them when they need. But in this context where basically everything has completely shifted and gone into really strange land, you have actually people are trying to find a building that is not on any map, that nobody knows, that the Russians kind of targeted with their bombings. And they also wanted a building that that had strong walls that could support blasts from the artillery and also from airfare, from jet planes. And there's something really awful when you see preparations for opening a hospital, and you see fortification of the windows happen as the first thing to do is putting sandbags in the window to prevent that. And I think that really speaks volumes about how deliberate and how targeted the hospitals were by the regime. And that's something that Professor Goddard just talked about in terms of that it's willful and deliberate targeting of hospitals.
So I have some unfortunate news. We are unable to reestablish the internet connection with Waad. And one of the reasons that this is so unfortunate is I have been scrolling through the incredibly meaningful and thoughtful questions that have been put into the chat. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to cut this conversation short. But with that being said, we spoke to Waad before we came into this room, and she spoke about how meaningful it was to be at Wellesley with us virtually today. She spoke about how interested she was in speaking to you all, and I know she will be interested in hearing your questions. So we will pass those questions along to her. Thank you so much for joining us for the conversation we did have today. And I want to again say a special thank you to Professor Aadnani for leading this conversation. We were so lucky and fortunate to have you with all of your experience and knowledge, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again to all of our partners on campus. Thanks to all of you for attending. And once again, I urge you to watch the documentary if you haven't, and I urge you to look at all the places that you too can take action for the people that have been hurt by this conflict. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you so much, Professor Goddard, for putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you.